Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the show, I would like to welcome Mimi Gordon, who is a leader, trainer, coach, where she combines her deep experience leading companies, people, and teams with mental and emotional management skills, human brain science, and awareness of socialization to help her clients lead well and live well. We have so much to talk about, so let's jump right into this and welcome Mimi.
Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Summer, for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for being on the show. So let's jump right into this. But before we really delve into your professional life, if you could describe your journey in one word to this point, what would that word be and why?
It is so hard to pick one word as a kind of verbose human being, but I am going to pick curiosity. I really pay attention to the things that I develop a lot of curiosity about, and I tend to move in the direction of things that pique my curiosity. And I think everything throughout my career when I was employed, before I started my business, everything about my life, when you look at the kind of things that I've pursued outside of the kind of quote unquote professional realm of my life, is all about what kind of enchants me or lights up my brain like a pinball machine and makes me curious about something. And then I tend to just go all into that thing with a lot of gusto for, and really passionately. And what that has given me is these like very kind of disparate places, like disparate or kind of disconnected seeming themes and topics that I am just like, I know a lot about, or I have skills in, or that I just have fun doing. And I love to follow the things that I'm curious about. And I love it when something kind of lights my brain up and says, hey, go down this path for a minute, or go down this rabbit hole and see what happens. And I love seeing what happens on the other side and how I never could predict it at the very beginning.
Let me ask you something about that theory and that action.
Yeah.
When it lights you up and you get curious, because we get curious about a lot of different things, how do you kind of funnel that in and apply that to your business, your daily life? Tell me more.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I've cultivated, I think I have some natural ability around this, but it's a skill that I've built through like painful trial and error also, is limiting that curiosity and knowing that the power of my curiosity is exponentially greater when I constrain and prioritize. I love to go deep on things, and I love to almost like mono focus. My husband sometimes makes fun of me because he'll be like, I tried to say something to you, but you were focused on something, and we know how that goes. And there will just like, I can focus without taking in any input, and I can focus on the thing in front of me. And that's true in a moment, but it's also true about how I like to pursue things. So when I find myself going, squirrel, squirrel, what about this? What about this? What about this? I do have a voice in my head, like I said, that through trial and error, I've learned like I have to listen to the voice that says, nope, what are the 3 things that we're focused on right now? What are the 2 things that we're focused on right now? How deep will we be able to learn this thing? Notice I talk to myself, and I talk to myself in the like plural for some reason with the royal we. That like, what are we focused on? What am I focused on? What am I doing? I can focus on this thing in my business. I can focus on this thing that is kind of my like passion project right now that is business related or personal related. But I have to constrain. And when my brain wants to not constrain, I know that that's a sign that I will basically not be able to do anything well, because I won't be able to give any priority the focus that it needs.
I was just having a conversation, I can't remember with what person, but it was about this very thing, how we as entrepreneurs love to be creative. And when we act on something so quickly, sometimes it may not be lasting because it was passion that prompted that, which passion prompts a lot of things, but it may not be lasting because everything about it doesn't necessarily align with all of our values or our exact mission. So I do really appreciate you having said what you said in regards to that inner voice saying, what are those three things that I really want to focus on now? How can I pare this down without going down every single rabbit hole or road where I'm going to be so disconnected from that mission? And it's okay to be passionate. It's okay to be creative, but how do you reel that in?
Right, exactly. And it's like, it's like sometimes I ask myself this question and I ask my clients this question too, because I walk them through this process of, hey, let's decide deliberately ahead of time what our constrained priorities are so that we can say hell yes to all of the things that are most important instead of medium yes to a bunch of other things. But how do we say really a full-throated yes to the things that are most important? And I walk them through this process. So I ask them, and I ask myself this sometimes, am I passionate enough about this? Do I think this is important enough that I am ready and up for and committed to the parts where it's hard and it doesn't feel easy and it doesn't feel like I'm in flow and everything is automatic? Because and other people who are entrepreneurs know, and anyone who's ever led a project or an initiative or a strategic plan, anything, we know that we get really excited about things. And when we're excited, we see all of the positives. And there will inevitably be a part where we fail, where we experience challenge or adversity. And what the project, what the goal, what the area of focus is inviting us to is to become the person who can move through that adversity and become stronger for it. And you have to be ready for that. And if you're ready for that, then you can say like, oh, on the other side of this goal, not only will I have pursued this passion, but I also will have gone to the kind of emotional and mental gym and worked on the muscles required to be able to do the lift to achieve this goal or whatever the thing is, the area of focus that I have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you have that set in your mind, it allows for you to overcome the adversity and become more resilient, because you're absolutely right. We can have a lot of passion about something and we see the opportunities in all of that. But are they the passions that are going to have longevity, because we're going to overcome those challenges along the way and be able to see the misstep for what it is and apply the next step because of what we learned from those missteps?
Yes.
When you reflect back on your journey, what are some of the personal experiences that brought you to this point in your life and how you have cultivated your passions?
I've just started in two places. One is, she is of blessed memory. My mom passed away a few years ago, but she told me my whole life from the second that I was born, you're special, you're beautiful, you do whatever you want. And she instilled in me this sense of independence, that she had me do things on my own at a very young age. And part of that is like, she was an 80s mom. She was working and managing a household and did not have equal division of labor between her and her husband. She was managing the household, working full time. She had 2 kids. And she was like, yeah, you're 8. You're going to learn how to do your laundry. Yeah, you're going to learn how to take the bus by yourself and be safe. She instilled so much independence in me and just gave me a sense of, I don't know, try it. I think that matches my natural tendency, but also was nurtured by her. So I think that is experience number 1. Experience number 2, I think, is my entire relationship with the organization that formed my sense of what leadership is. An organization called Camp Tawonga, with which I'm still affiliated. I went to camp there as a child. I worked there as a summer staffer at a resident summer camp. I became a supervisor there for the first time. I then joined the professional team and directed the organization for close to a decade. And so my affiliation is literally, I'm going up this year, and this will mark the 40th anniversary of me setting foot on the property. It's a lifelong affiliation. The experience that I want to highlight is that I got a kind of training in leadership and community management and management skills and thoughtfulness of culture building I have not met another person except a person who was affiliated with Camp Tawonga who has gotten as thoughtful and thorough a training or just kind of like a sense of heading in the right direction that I got. When I have gone outside of Tawonga to other organizations, or when I lead things, or when I lead a workshop, the comments that I used to get, especially earlier in my career, where I think it was like a little bit more surprising, is like, you just know how to do this. It seems in your DNA, and it absolutely is not. It was imprinted into just my ethos and who I am as a human being by people who really carefully crafted how do you lead well? How do you build intentional culture? How do you empower people to do their best work and make them feel part of something bigger? And I get to learn side by side with my mentors who were constantly tweaking and correcting and giving me positive feedback about my work and seeing special in me. And I got to do that very early in my career. The entirety of my professional demeanor and persona formed in that kind of space. And that was so special. I think those are two big things. And then the other thing is just throughout my career, I'm always drawn to how do we do things? What's the way that we do things to kind of lead intentionally, lead well, to help people be their best? I'm very drawn to like human development, human potential, organizational systems. How do you work in a way that brings everyone's best together and creates something that is greater than the sum of its parts? I love managing teams. I've always loved that. I've always loved training people. I've always loved identifying what is the root issue that we really want to teach people about so that they can go make really great decisions on their own, as opposed to here's how you make this decision and here's how you make this decision. No one wants a big book of rules. And so I love doing that. And throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to do that. And I've also had the opportunity to observe what are the differences? What do I see amongst leaders? Where do I see them thriving? Where do I see them struggling? What do I see is different between, for example, in my work, a lot of the work that I do with my clients is about how women are socialized and how we are taught to behave in the workplace and in life in general. What we are taught, quote unquote, success looks like, or quote unquote, doing it the right way looks like, and how those things that we're taught show up in the habits that we bring into the workplace and sometimes end up basically costing us, or we end up developing habits or using those things at our own expense. So a lot of my clients come to me and they say, for example, that they're exhausted, that they have too many things, too many inputs. And as they've been promoted, as they're now in the C-suite of their organization, for example, or whatever it is, they're like, the inputs are just too many. There's no way that I can get all of this done. And what's happening is I'm getting exhausted and kind of resentful. And most of them are mid-career. And what they have done for an entire career is done as much as possible. They've been high performers. They've said yes. They've helped people. They've over-delivered. And they are at a point where all these things that we're taught about what doing it right is, which is do say yes, be kind, be nurturing, tend to other people, do as much as you can. Your value is measured in your productivity. Your value is measured in hours. All of these things that we are taught, that we've internalized, that we don't believe intellectually, but we've internalized them, come up against with the lives that we want to lead. And so my observation of that throughout my career has made me very passionate about working with people now to say, oh, I can actually look at those messages that I've internalized and I can create a reality for myself that is based on my own definition of success, not a programmed definition of success. But I can say success for me looks like showing up in my job very well resourced. Success for me looks like having enough mental, emotional, and physical energy to be at my best all day long. Success for me looks like my doctor's appointments go on my calendar and they are more important than any meeting ever will be. That observation led to this shift that I help women make for themselves now. And that is like, that's been crucial. So I think those three things. Long answer.
That's okay. I absolutely love that you can identify those three things along your journey that has brought you to this point. First of all, I think we had a very similar parent, a mother that was courageous enough to be able to say to you, I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you this much freedom because I want you to be independent enough and courageous enough yourself to go out and explore and be curious. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that it taps back into that initial curiosity. You're
Mm-hmm.
curious. And maybe because another woman in your life said, be curious. This is what you're going to do. I need you to be curious. I need you to be courageous. Go take the bus at 8. I'm going to show you
Yeah.
how. I'm going to give you a bus pass. And that was my mother at 10. I'm going to show you how to do this. You're going to go to a school outside of the district, so you have to take the city bus. This is where you're going to sit. This is what you're going to look out for. And yet
Mm-hmm.
she was able to do that and be courageous enough to do that, because that's scary. That would be scary for a parent as well. And
Yeah,
yet
absolutely.
she allowed for that curiosity, that courageousness to be developed in you. Second thing, this training that you had at Tawanga,
Mm-hmm.
very interesting, because you had, like you said, 40 years on that property, 40 years with that
Mm-hmm.
organization, 40 years that you're going to go back to, where you start learning about leadership, culture,
Mm-hmm.
development of systems, and all those really great things. Whereas a lot of people will like learn that in pieces, in parts.
Right.
So there's a lack of maybe continuity, but at the same
Yeah.
time, they are gaining that information, but in different ways. So
Yeah.
I love that you had that experience, that you're still connected with that organization, and it enlightened you to say, this is just part of your DNA. This is something you've learned over many decades.
Yes.
When it comes to that systems approach, and I'm going to ask this next question, you've been leading and training others for over 20 years as the director of a nonprofit and the VP of people for an educational for-profit. Over the number
Mm-hmm.
of decades that you've led and trained people, what are some of the most significant aspects of professional, company, or organizational culture that has stood out to you, and why?
I want to say something, if I can, just really quickly about
Sure.
what you just said, which is I think you're right that some people learn this in pieces. I
Yeah.
think that's correct. I am astounded by the number of people that are asked to lead with no support and no training.
Yeah.
And it is strange to me, and it is strange to my colleagues from both the educational company that I worked for, which is called Galileo, and Tuanga, that my colleagues, especially those of us who led together at those two organizations, like when people come back and they report to me and they say, like, I'm in touch with people that I worked with or supervised who are like, this just doesn't exist other places. The thoughtfulness of leadership and the training of leaders. Leadership is an honor for sure. And leadership is very light in that it is joyful, but it is something, in my opinion, to be taken seriously. People who lead have outsized influence over the people that they lead. And to not enable someone who is naturally drawn to leadership and skilled, to not enable people to do that well with some theory and some background and some practices and some techniques, and to throw people into that with absolutely no help, that's like, it's not only counterproductive, it can be dangerous. And it certainly doesn't help those leaders have a baseline sort of confidence in what they're doing. So I wanted to say that. And then I want to get back to your question, which is, I think that culturally strong organizations, my short answer to this is they have strong purpose or mission. You don't have to have a mission statement. I don't mean the actual product, but a strong purpose or mission. They have a strong set of values or guiding principles. And not only do they have those things, but those things are operationalized throughout their culture. So what that means is decisions get made by looking at those things for guidance. Is this on mission? If the answer is no, no matter how much revenue it generates, we're going to say no to it. Is this decision in line with our values and how we behave? I think of it as like, why are we working? How are we working? And then what are we doing? And the what are we doing can change over time, but the why are we working and the how are we working? How do we work together? What is the way that we approach this? When those two things are strong and they're actually like, I call it like emotionally understood as opposed to intellectually understood. When you have an emotional understanding of those things, that leads to behavioral understanding, which means your staff, your employees, your team, the people that work for you are actually making decisions in their workdays based on those principles and that way of being. And when that happens, you have incredibly strong culture. You have incredibly strong and intentional culture. You can have an incredibly strong culture that is just by default and you'll get good or bad, we don't know. But a very strong intentional culture means that your values are habituated. The way that you do work is like, it shows up in the way that people approach their work and the way they make decisions. And that kind of culture enables smart people to be really empowered and autonomous in the work that they do. And they don't need a lot of handholding because they know how to make decisions well.
So many things that you have mentioned here are so valuable and so important. So when you talk about these women, the women that you work with, and I know that in your bio, you mentioned in the bio and our previous conversation that much of the work you do focuses on women. And you talked about this, you touched on this already, that we do come in with this conditioning. We are exhausted to some point because we have said yes to a lot of things. We have molded ourselves to meet the expectations of these companies, and yet we're still not where we necessarily envision ourselves to be. And we're exhausted, potentially. What would you say to a woman who is working in that type of environment, needs the job, but how does she actually bring herself into it without people looking at her going, what's wrong? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you performing in the same way?
So here's what I want to say to that, which is I just wrote something about this recently. Here's the thing with people that are high performing, that over deliver, those of us that like love to do a good job, we love to get a gold star, we love to do all the things and we love to over deliver. Like that's what we love. We think that when we start to say no, and I know this from my own personal painful experience, we think that when we start to say no, everyone will be upset. They will not be. I want to give people exactly what to do, like say, like, this is what you should do, and tell you how my clients do it and give you some examples. Some of my favorite coaching calls are like, someone comes in, they've got a big smile on their face, and I'm like, tell me what happened. And they're like, Mimi, I stopped answering emails after 5 p.m. and I've been doing it all week since the last time we talked. And you know what happened? And I say, what? They say, a whole bunch of my colleagues and peers started doing the same thing. The people on my team stopped emailing me after 5 and checking their email after 5. So they start to do these things that are about establishing work boundaries. And not only do people not object to it, they ultimately are having a positive influence on the culture of their teams and companies by doing it. Because what we think is like, oh my God, I'm going to have to lower my standards. That's what this means. I'm at this place where I have to lower my standards. I have to stop being as good as I am. No, what we have to do is enable us to be at our best selves for a higher proportion of our day than what is currently happening in our exhausted, depleted, and sometimes resentful state. So when we enable that and we draw a boundary, other people get inspired and they go, oh, let's do this. And I hear that story over and over and over again. So how my clients do that, and what I usually recommend is, hey, find one way or two ways. You can do more if you want, but find a couple of ways that you literally or metaphorically go on your calendar first. Make every doctor's appointment that you haven't made, or make one. Start picking your kids up from school 3 days a week. These are places that my clients start, or they start by saying, yeah, I'm drawing a line that I don't answer email and I don't check my phone after, pick the time.
Yeah.
Where they start saying, I'm drawing a boundary. I'm saying no to something, even if it's not yet saying no to a person. I'm saying yes to myself, and I'm saying yes to myself first. My needs are going to go before other people's wants. And that is a really powerful shift, because the reason we get so exhausted and sometimes resentful is that this socialization and this patterning has us doing everything for everyone else at our own expense sometimes. My clients are like, I'm not exercising, I'm not running, I'm a marathon runner, I'm not running anymore. I'm not exercising like I should. I'm not spending time with my family. My family is my number one priority. I haven't made my dentist appointment, my doctor's appointment, fill in the blank. I haven't gotten a haircut. That seems silly, but it's true. Like I haven't gotten a haircut in 4 months because I just don't have time for it. Start by putting yourself on your calendar first. Like for next week, pick the 3 things that you're going to do on your calendar for you first. Do that and then watch what shifts from there. And what most people find is like, not only do people not object, you might inspire them. And a lot of people will thank you for doing it, especially other women. They'll say like, oh my God, yes, thank you. I'm going to do that too. And that, my friends, whew, that's powerful.
It is. It is doing so many different things. You're creating a new condition.
Yes.
You are then creating what people are then, as a result, starting to mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many things that are happening here that are changing that system. And you're also changing the dialogue in your own head. You're changing
exactly
the mindset because you have been conditioned. So how do we do this gradually? These changes gradually. It doesn't all have to happen tomorrow. It's
right.
1, 2, or 3 steps.
Yes.
Making yourself a priority.
Especially if there's mental load from thinking about how you're not doing it. We carry that with us. That is weight. It's not free, right? Most
Right.
of us, like if you're totally free, like, everyone make your own decisions. But if you're walking around and you're carrying mental weight about what you haven't done, and you're like, I know I need to do that. I know I need to do that. I know I need to do that.
Yeah.
That is like carrying around like a weighted backpack with you all day long, every day. You're not going to have as much energy. It's going to exhaust you.
Absolutely. This is years of layering.
Yes.
This condition is layered. So start with taking a layer off at a time. It's small steps. So we have covered so much here from where began that first word of curiosity, which led us to where you are today, what is of value to you, how you work with others and their culture and their process, how you work with other women, the mindset, the changing of that conditioning. We've covered so much. So as we come to the close of the interview, my last question is, if you were to give the listeners one tip about how to have or cultivate a deeper understanding of what is possible in their lives, what would that tip be?
The tip is like a part A and part B. The first is assume that you know virtually nothing when you think you know everything, and then take 2 or 3 steps in the direction of what you want to be possible. The thing that I see in my work, like I'm going to give you a really practical example. A lot of the women that I work with, if they're thinking about changing jobs, and I remember this so strongly myself from my own personal experience, that we're like, I'm not going to be able to go and find something that has people that I love as much as I do here, with the amount of money that I'm making, with the kind of benefits that I have in the industry that I want to work in. That doesn't exist. This is a great example of assume you know nothing. Assume your perspective is so limited and you cannot possibly see what is out there. And until you put your eyes up and you switch from wherever you're feeling right now to, I am curious. What if I'm wrong? What if there is not only one thing out there, but what if there are a whole bunch of things I can't yet imagine? What would be 3 steps that I could take in the next week to just find out if I don't know enough to be able to make a decision based on the information that I have? And when we do that, when we assume that we're always going to underestimate what's possible and we take action with that assumption, what happens is we find out how much we don't know. We find out, oh, right, I was head down in this small world and I was not up at 30,000 feet looking at the entire landscape of possibility for myself. And we're constantly underestimating. So if you can assume, like when you're certain that something won't work, assume you're probably wrong. Assume you're probably underestimating yourself. It's what we do, generally speaking. And then decide on a small list of doable actions that could help you get more information about what's possible. Following that process over and over again, you'll constantly blow your own mind and see over and over again, like, oh, I'm always wrong about what's possible. Turns out way more is possible than I thought. I had no idea.
Well, thank you, Mimi, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Oh, Dr. Summer, it has been such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you. You can follow Mimi Gordon on Instagram at Mimi Gordon Coaching and LinkedIn at Mimi Gordon. To learn more or explore working with Amy, visit her at mimigordon.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women Podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.